Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Michael Yankee, and today we're going to cover the human anatomy. Basically, we're going to do an introduction of the human anatomy, and then we'll also look at some divisions of the body. Okay, so basically, if you are new to anatomy, if you're a medical student or if you're an allied health student, and this is your first time doing anatomy, this is one of the first lectures that you are likely to encounter. Introduction to anatomy, and also divisions, looking at the nomenclatures and also looking at planes of the human body. Okay, so at the end of this presentation, I would expect that you would be able to define anatomy actually from the root word. You should be able to explain the importance of human anatomy. You should be able to discuss the history of human anatomy. You should be able to discuss the various divisions of human anatomy. Okay, so let's start. Introduction to anatomy. So anatomy actually comes from the root word. It's actually a Greek word which means anatomy. Anatomy means that cutting up. Okay, so you notice that usually when you go to the dissection room, there are cadavers. We make a lot of cuts just to study structures. So that's basically the root word of anatomy, just cutting up of body structures. That's anatomy basically. So anatomy simply means the study of the structure of body parts and their relationships to one another. Okay, so for instance, how the heart is connected to the brain, how the heart is connected to the liver, how the heart is connected to the spleen, how the heart is connected to the stomach. That's the relationship between structures, and it's by cutting all those structures up that you can really appreciate how they work together. Now we'll look at the importance of anatomy. Anatomy is arguably the bedrock of biomedical and medical sciences and the cornerstone of medicine, which I agree. I mean, the physiologists also tell you that their discipline is actually the bedrock. I don't agree with that. I actually think the anatomy is the bedrock of biomedical and medical sciences. Another importance is that it forms a basis for a systematic and intelligent approach to the examination of a patient. Another importance is that it is useful for recognition of pathological changes. Example is appendicitis. So for instance, we know where the appendix is. If you look at the quadrants of the abdomen, okay, we know that the appendix anatomically is found at the right iliac fossa. So if a patient comes to you and the person is complaining of right iliac fossa pain, okay, you know what particular structures are there, and you know that from your anatomy that is likely to be the appendix. Then you can make an educated guess and say, oh, it's likely to be an appendicitis. You can entertain that diagnosis. Okay, this is basically one of the importance of anatomy. Another importance of anatomy is that it forms a basis for an intelligent surgical management of the various disease conditions. So of course you cannot be a very good surgeon if your anatomy is on life support. Your anatomy has to be very, very good because it's the basis for an intelligent surgical management. The last thing is that it forms a basis for radiological diagnosis. Now, so we'll look at the historical review of anatomy. We are going to look at various individuals and their contribution to anatomy. We'll look at their works and anything they did as far as the study of anatomy is concerned. What you need to take from this part is that you don't necessarily have to choose the year they were born or the period in which they lived. You just need to know their names and perhaps their contribution to anatomy. Okay, so the development of anatomy is as a science dates way back to ancient Greece. Okay, you remember the capital of Greece, which is Athens, from 500 to 300 BC before Christ. So the first individual we're going to talk about is Almaxion of Croton. Alcmaeon of Croton. I don't know if I got the name right. Alcmaeon of Croton, 515 BC. Okay, what he actually did was he conducted dissections on animals, probably goats. Okay, and he was actually the first person to identify the brain as the seat of understanding and also to distinguish understanding from perception. That's what this individual did. He was also taught to indicate that the sensory organs were actually connected to the brain by channels. So when they refer to channels, they mean nerve cells, okay, or nerve fibers. And this man also discovered these nerve fibers connecting the eyes to the brain, okay, what we call the optic nerve, by excising the eyeball of an animal, although it is doubtful that he used dissection as a standard method. Okay, so this is what he did. So you can just note the name of the man. You don't need to learn the year, and just learn his contribution to anatomy. He was the first to identify the brain as a seat of understanding and also to distinguish understanding from perception. So Alcmaeon of Croton. Alcmaeon of Croton. Now, still in Athens, okay, Greece, we look at another man that most of us are familiar with, Hippocrates. Most of us are familiar with this man, Hippocrates, also known as the father of medicine. Okay, so what he did was he studied the brain of a goat, including its blood supply, and he was also the first to classify the human race according to physical characteristics. And he made very important observations on fetuses and the anatomy of the heart. Okay, so father of medicine, he studied the brain of a goat, including its blood supply. He classified the human race according to physical characteristics and also made observations on fetuses and the anatomy of the heart. The second individual we'll look at is Herophilus. So now we are moving from Greece to Egypt, where arguably is stated to be the place where civilization started. Okay, Herophilus from 325 to 255 BC. He was the first to recognize the brain as the seat of intelligence and as the central organ of the nervous system. He also divided nerves into motor and sensory components. Now, he was the first to also make a dichotomy between the cerebrum and the cerebellum, which is found in the brain. Okay, distinguish between cerebrum and cerebellum. All right, Herophilus distinguished between cerebrum and cerebellum. He divided nerves into motor and sensory components and also recognized the brain as a seat of intelligence and as the central organ of the nervous system. Then we are moving to the Roman Empire. Galen. So if you start neuroanatomy, you're going to hear one popular vein, which is the great vein of Galen. And this vein was actually named after this man. Great vein of Galen was named after Galen. Okay, 129 to 199 AD. What he did was he studied and described the human skeleton and also classified joints. And he also was the first to give an accurate description of the form and functions of muscles. He also classified cranial nerves. Okay, we'll talk about that later, cranial nerves in neuroanatomy. And his theories on human anatomy dominated and also influenced medical sciences until the Renaissance period. All right. So just know the few things that he did. He classified the cranial nerves, he gave an accurate description of the form and functions of muscles, and he was also the first to study and describe the human skeleton and also classified joints. Then we move to modern times. Another interesting and wonderful man. He was actually a surgeon and also a Belgian anatomist by name Andreas Vesalius. He was the first to dissect human body, okay, and also give lectures to a very large audience. So you can see this man with his beard, Andreas Vesalius. Still on Andreas Vesalius, he published a monograph titled On the Fabric of the Human Body and also highlighted more than 200 errors in Galen's theory. You remember Galen, great vein of Galen, okay, and also brought a paradigm shift to the study and teaching of anatomy. Then we move to Italy. There's a man by name Marcello Malpighi. He was an Italian anatomist and physiologist. And what he did was he was the first to use a microscope in the study of anatomy and also discovered the capillary system in 1661. And he led the study of microscopic structure of animals and tissues during the 17th century. Marcello Malpighi. Then we move to Netherlands, the Dutch. There was a Dutch natural scientist by name Anton van Leeuwenhoek in 1675. He developed the first of the 400 simple microscopes, and he used one to give the first accurate description of red corpuscles. Okay, Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Then we go to France, Marie-François Xavier. He was the first to use the word tissue, from French word tissu, which means to weave or texture, in the biological sense. He was an anatomist who pioneered histological study of organs. Okay, Marie-François Xavier. So when you remember histology, he was the pioneer of histological studies of organs, Marie-François Xavier. Then we come to Czech. This guy was a Czech physiologist by name Johannes Evangelista Purkinje. So if you know the anatomy of the heart, there's one part called the Purkinje fibers. Okay, it was named after him. And then what he did was he invented the microtome and also created the world's first department of physiology at the University of Breslau in Prussia in 1839, and the world's first official physiology laboratory in 1842. Like I said earlier on, you don't need to know all these things. Just know the name of the scientists or whoever made contributions to anatomy, and just know briefly what they did. Okay. Then we'll come to the divisions of anatomy. The divisions of anatomy. Traditionally, anatomy can be classified or is studied as gross anatomy, microscopic anatomy, or what we call histology, the study of tissues, developmental anatomy, what we call embryology. Then we have neuroanatomy. So during your semester, there will be a combination of all these classifications of anatomy. So you do gross anatomy, you do a little bit of microscopic anatomy, you do developmental anatomy, then you do neuroanatomy. So we'll pick each one and we'll break them down. Also, I would like to mention that there are some specialized branches of anatomy. Pathological anatomy, which is the study of structural changes caused by diseases. We also have radiographic anatomy, which is the study of internal structures, which is visualized by X-ray. Then we look at molecular biology, which is the study of anatomical structures at the subcellular level. Okay, so the first one, the gross anatomy. Gross anatomy can further be divided into 3 regions. Okay, we have the regional, we have the systematic or systemic, then we have the surface anatomy. So regional gross anatomy. So regional anatomy simply is the study of structures located in various regions of the body. So you can have head and neck, you can have upper limb, you can have the thorax, you can have the abdomen, you can have the pelvis, you can have the perineum, and then you have the lower limbs. Okay, so listen to how I'm mentioning it. It's in the form of regions. So the first part is head and neck. So head and neck. Then you come down to your upper limb. Then you go to your thorax, where your heart is. Then you go to where your stomach is, and your small and large intestine, your abdomen. Then you come to your perineum, your pelvic area, then your lower limb. So that's regional gross anatomy. Then you can come to systemic anatomy, or you can say systematic. Systemic anatomy actually is the organization of the body into functional units. So there's the nervous system, there's the cardiovascular system, there's the respiratory system, there's the digestive system, there's the genitourinary system. Okay, so now you can distinguish between regional and then the systemic anatomy. Okay, then the surface anatomy is just the study of the internal structures as they relate to the overlying skin. This is not really important. Under the gross anatomy, what you need to know is the regional anatomy and the systemic anatomy. Regional and systemic. For the regional anatomy, I've just said that you divide the body into regions. So head and neck, upper limb, thorax, abdomen, pelvis, or the perineum, then the lower limbs. Then for the systemic gross anatomy, you look at the nervous system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, digestive system, genitourinary system. Okay, then you come to microscopic anatomy or histology, the study of tissues. So this is the study of cells. You study cells, you study tissues and organs by using a microscope. Okay, so the study of cells is actually called cytology, and the study of tissues is called histology. Study of cells, cytology. study of tissues is histology. Okay, now there's another aspect called the neuroanatomy, where you study the nervous system, you study the brain, the spinal cord, and the peripheral nerves. Okay, so we're going to end here. This has been the introduction. Okay, we've looked at the historical perspective of anatomy. We've looked at the divisions of anatomy. Thank you very much for your time. Like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video.